Morning, everyone. On behalf of Mid-Ulster District Council, welcome to the Recipe for Recovery, Tourism and Hospitality webinar. This is one of 12 events across Enterprise Week that's helping support our local businesses through this very challenging time. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. The session is being recorded so that we can upload this to the Council's website after the webinar. But all attendees that are joining us will not be on camera and will have their microphones off throughout. So you'll not actually be in the recording of the presentation. We do want the presentation to be interactive and engaging. So there is at the bottom of your screen a Q&A button. If there's at any point this morning that you have any questions that you would like to present to Michael or Mary, please do put them into the Q&A button and we'll be able to answer those questions towards the end of the session. I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today, Michael Deane, for what will be a very interesting and informative session. Michael is joined by Mary McGee from Mid-Ulster District Council, and Mary will talk and chat to Michael about the current climate in hospitality. So please do feel free to take notes. The slides will be shared with you afterwards. But now I'll hand over to Michael and Mary for this morning's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil, for that lovely introduction. I'd like to welcome Michael with us here this morning as well. So our discussion today is going to centre around, I suppose, first of all, Michael's going to give us an introduction on how he started and what he has achieved in his business to date. So that should be a really interesting start to this morning. We're also going to discuss the impact of COVID, particularly on Michael's business, how he has managed, adapted and evolved in business over the period of the pandemic to counteract this, and what supports he feels business, hospitality and tourism need to get through. We'll move on to some suggestions around the road to recovery for the hospitality and tourism sector. And I suppose the key word of Mid-Ulster Council Enterprise Week is how to build resilience in the sector. What does our sector need to become more resilient? And any future lessons we need to learn given what has happened over the last year. What are kind of the takeaways that we need maybe going forward into next year and the following year? And finally then, key thoughts and takeaways Michael can give to other hospitality and tourism businesses who feature here today. Okay, Michael, so a wee bit of background. First of all, we give you a great intro there. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, Mary, Neil. Thanks for having us, and everybody out there listening. And I'm sure everybody out there listening is not in a good place. I'd say most of the guys here today are from hospitality backgrounds, so fair play and thanks for taking the time. When I look back all those years ago, which was a lot of years ago, I wasn't one of those people who was taught to cook by their mother. I was just sort of thrown at the deep end. I decided I wanted to cook or I wanted to cut hair, whichever was going to be the easiest. I obviously took the harder option. Started off in a little coastal hotel in Delicatessen called the Imperial Hotel. We'd left Belfast because of the troubles in the early 70s, and things weren't so good in the city. And we moved down the coast. My father had a big job as a television engineer, and things weren't so good. So we moved down the coast, and I got a job in the Imperial Hotel in Delicatessen, and I was opening boxes of Black Forest gatos and those beautiful breaded placed fillets and the orange breadcrumbs and the deep fat fryer. And to me, I thought this was cooking. I thought this was what you'd done, and I thought this was relatively easy, earning a few pounds a week. And as when time went on and I started to read, as one was quite a nosy sort of person, this wasn't what cooking was really about. What people were doing in London, Albert Roux, Michel Roux, Anton Mosman, people had arrived in the UK to try to change the world. And I felt that I possibly needed to be part of that. So, of course, as at a 17-and-a-half-year-old, one gets on a flight to that big city in London. with the long black hair and the Irish accent, and that's where it sort of started to become quite difficult, because when you arrived there, they used to say, when they called you Paddy, that how stupid you were. You soon realised you were quite stupid. You didn't really apply for jobs in those days. There was like a thing called a pool where you queued up and you got a ticket. And I got this ticket to go to Claridge's more or less every day, where I'd go in and wash pots or pick herbs or do anything, or pick something up on the floor and ask people do this or do that. And I genuinely started to settle in. I went there that I wanted to be able to just be able to be part of it, and to take the stick, take the grief and whatever, you know. And you talk with, you know, the sore points about these things, and we talk about Black Lives Matter and bits and pieces. You know, I wish we had in the 70s and 80s that Irish Lives Matter, because it was difficult. And, you know, I used to spend time in my bedsit trying to practice changing my accent. It was that bad. And, you know, we had such a lot of drama going in through the Troubles. If there'd be a bomb in Hyde Park Corner, I used to be frightened to go into work and things like that. I think it was very, very difficult to manage the Irish situation. But there was a few Irish boys in London, and they were quite successful and would protect you from the storm. And England became my second home. And I spent sort of 10 years there, moving around bits and pieces. It wasn't until I really I came home one time for a lecture by a gentleman called Anton Mosselman, who was the mattress chef in Dorchester at 28 years old. The only chef outside Paris to have two-star Michelin in a hotel environment. So as he went to a lavatory in a Shelbourne hotel, I decided to follow him, which maybe wasn't that tasteful. But as we were standing together, and I said, "Chef, blah, 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 blah," give him the history. It was a 4-year waiting list to get into the Dorchester Hotel. 4 years waiting list in 1980, whatever it was, in the early 80s. And 3 days later, I got a slip of paper through my mother's postbox that I'd been accepted as a fourth commis chef in a Dorchester hotel. So off I went back to London, head held high, blah, blah, blah. In the brigade of 150, 160 chefs at that time. Was completely mind-blowing. But it was like just starting all over again, learning the basics, keeping the head down, being sensible, trying to live on £75 a week and paying your tube pass, which is 30 odd, blah, blah, blah. So no money, no nothing, but plenty of education. And that's what it was there for. And I kept my head down for sort of 3-4 years, moved around another few hotels in London. Absolutely hated the side of the town. Still hate the side of the town, even if I go back there to eat. I just remember rocking myself back to sleep in a tube, you know, going home in the night bus at 1 o'clock in the morning, getting back up to be back on the shift at 7 a.m. I know everybody hears these stories, but it was tough. And now we're more or less compelled to have people working for a 40-hour week by HFs, MRC, and everything else. You know, the hours them days were about 80, 85 hours. And we got on with it, we done it. There was a time, of course, that I wanted to come home. And I wanted to set the world on fire in Northern Ireland. I think I've yet to do that. But when I got home, I'd taken a job at a beautiful property called Belfast Castle. First and foremost, it was a wedding venue. So we maybe had 5 weddings on a Saturday, 3 on a Tuesday. Bit like the sort of business that Gallagher Manor would do now. And that was all very well, but I wanted to cook in the kitchen. I wanted to cook for the accolades and whatever. So we had a little kitchen upstairs and a beautiful room which overlooked old Belfast Lock, and it looked like something in Hong Kong. And I worked away and tried my best. And my biggest nightmare was, my nightmare had already arrived in Shaftesbury Square, in the name of Paul Rankin, who bought an old restaurant closed by the environmental health called the Arabian Nights. So Paul went in there with his lovely wife Jeannie, hung a few curtains up, and it was all completely transformed away. And Roscoe probably changed the scene of Northern Ireland food. There's no doubt about that. He was the first. He was the best. Maybe he didn't hang around as long as me, but he changed the world. And out of that came There's chefs like the late Robbie Miller, who changed the world yet again down in Shanks. So he was quickly probably at the number 2, and I was at the number 3 as we moved out and opened our first restaurant in Helens Bay called Beanson Square. Only Michelin star restaurant in 1997 in the Michelin Guide. And I was over every chef's accolade, of course, to want to get a star Michelin. So it was then when we got the star, I said, well, look, I want to do bigger things. I don't want to be standing here, chop, 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 busy, busy, busy forever. And even though people always talk about Beanson Square, how wonderful it was and how it was one of the best restaurants, I wanted to go back. I wanted to go to the city, my city, not any other city. I wanted to go to Belfast and be part of the food scene there. So we opened, we bought a restaurant called Panama Jack's, which is in Hart Street, where Deane's still is to this day. And we put the restaurant upstairs, a 20-cover restaurant. We called it Restaurant Michael Deane, and we had Deane's Brasserie downstairs. But I just didn't want to have the badge of Michelin to cook for everyone at the sort of the top end. We wanted to try to give everybody a little taste of maybe something else, maybe in a breakfast, a lunch, a sandwich, whatever. To me, that was important to try to make it on a wider scale. I think we've been successful at that. But of course, what happened to 2 restaurants, of course, I got itchy. And our young son, Marco, who's basically born in Thailand, when he came home, we wanted to do like a nod to Asia. I love Asian food. I traveled extensively in Asia quite a bit. And we opened a restaurant called Chuck D in Bedford Street. And we're still actually waiting for people to come in. It was an absolute nightmare for us. I don't know how much money we lost. We just didn't understand. But you know, if you wind the years on and you look at places like the Bow Tree and that in Belfast, Thai food has become a phenomenon. It wasn't a phenomenon for us. It was a nightmare for us. I remember the bank had me in 4 days to stop 4 days in a row to tell me to stop spending their money, to spend some of our own. It was the 7th of December. Where we sort of ran out of juice, as they say, and they said, well, what are you going to do with this? But like as we're approaching these dates now, we still have our problems, of course. But we decided then, we painted the blackboards, we put sandwiches on, we got a canopy, done a bit of paint work, and we opened a restaurant called Deane's Deli. And bingo, all those years later, it was a great success. So Deane's Deli opened, we pushed forward even further. Queen's University came to speak to me about doing something in a restaurant up there, because they had the common rooms, which they called it, which they closed it, and they decided to open a brasserie called Versity, which was a bit of a disaster for them. I went to have a look at it. I said the only reason I would ever take this on is if I could pull the front of it out, build a terrace, do whatever. So the vision was good. But they said, you've got absolutely no chance to do that. I said, well, you can keep it yourself, and I'll continue to do what I do. A few weeks later, they come back. Cost a couple of £100,000. We pulled the front of it out. We built a terrace, and we have Deane's. Deane's of Queens, which has been one of our most successful restaurants to date. And then we moved on up the Lisburn Road, and we have a little restaurant called Deane and Decano. It's a funny name how we have the name, because we were going to call it Deane's and Co, just to do just pastas and light dishes and suppers and things for people on Lisburn Road. And one of my managers actually arrived in, and he said, what do you call the new restaurant, boss? And I said, oh, we're going to call it Deane's and Co. He said, that's very smart, Michael, because we're right beside the co-op. So then the head went down, and I said, well, I better think of what we're going to call this, because we can't come up beside the co-op. So actually, the name was born out of, we went straight into Google, and we Googled what Deane was in Italian, and it was Decano, office of the Dean, office of the church, blah, blah, blah. So Deane Decano was born. A bit confusing on the marketing point of view, but that's really it up to date. We had a few landslides in between in Banbridge, where we opened simply Deane's in Banbridge, because they gave us an awful lot of money to do it, but didn't work at all, because whole outlet centre then was a disaster. So you've got to get used to disasters. You've got to get used to falling over yourself and getting up, dusting yourself down, and that's the Deane's empire starting to be pulled apart now by COVID, but there you go.
And that brings us, Michael, to where we are today, I suppose. Just to move the story on, and you alluded to it there about COVID and the impact of COVID. So how have you managed or coped and, you know, within the business over the last sort of 8 or 9 months or so?
Well, I have found this a very difficult time as well. We've been through an awful lot of bad times in this industry, through bombs and replacing windows on a Friday afternoon, etc., etc. Flags was another issue where we didn't really know where to go. The big problem that I personally have by myself, and I've been quite voiced in the media about this, is that hospitality is not the enemy. Now, it's been portrayed on the media about restaurants, about bars, that we that maybe we're going in the wrong direction here. I think the leadership has been very poor. I think we've been very resilient. Ourselves, we've, if I look round the business at the moment, we are sort of clutching at straws like everybody is, because of the advice, because of the payments, because of the backup. Our restaurant in Bedford Street, which I talked about, Dean's Deli, the whole business was stripped right out of it because no Ulster Hall, no older people going to the Opera House, nobody in Invest.I, nobody in Deloitte, all the offices, everybody told to work from home. So that's a business which is completely in free fall, which is probably a business that's trading at £30,000 a week for the past 10 years. It's just more or less gone. So it sits there, remaining not open. And I haven't opened it. We tried to open whenever we were told to open, when we thought this was all over. We opened what we call the Mothership, which is in Hard Street, which has Meat Locker, Lovefish, and Epic. So we opened that, and it was absolutely superb. We had Eat Out to help out, which did help. A lot of people are very hard on that, and I think it's become a bad word in the industry for certain journalists to have a pick at it. But indeed, the Queen's open, indeed the Can open. So we were good and we were trading well. It was excellent. We actually had the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. McBride, telling us how wonderful we were doing, how brilliant it was. I noticed that everybody maybe wasn't just playing the rules or playing the rule book, and the time when we brought the curfew, etc., in for the 11 o'clock closing, you could round the corner and you'd see pubs still spilling out. Annoying me an awful lot, because we're all meant to be in one industry. People buying empty pizza boxes and then showing bills of a pint of Heineken and 19 bags of chips. So we all weren't in one country. Lots of us have been guilty about not playing the rules. So I've called for a document of compliance if we do open up again, which I haven't seen. I think, you know, what is a food-driven pub? You know, it should have a menu, it should have a chef, it should have a kitchen. These things haven't happened. So it's all it's kamikaze stuff, and I just don't want the industry to crash. But I feel very strong and sometimes quite emotional about the direction that it's been given, and it's hard to fight with medicine and numbers of deaths, and we're not here to do that. But you know, whenever I hear Dr. Tom Black saying words like, the way he even pronounces hospitality, you know, we're not here to insult the man's profession. He should have a bit more respect for ours. We understand the hospital numbers. We understand that. We respect that. It's the most important thing. If I thought that COVID was in one of our restaurants, I'd gladly hand the keys back to the landlord and move off into the sunset. You know, and I know we're sort of making a bit of this up as we go along, but when we opened, whenever the minister came to the steps of Deans of Queens and said we can open, again, it was just a sheet of paper, what you had to do. We invested in sanitized stations, £500–600 each, changed all the air conditioning, changed all the sinks. I've invested in an outside room in Dean's at Queens on the terrace at a 3-figure sum. Whenever Mr. Swan said, try to move people outside, try to do this, try to do that. So we went through everything we were meant to go through. But we still felt like the guilty. And this is one thing, I don't know what everybody else feels about that, but we haven't been beaten, but you feel as if you're underwater with somebody's foot on your head trying to get back up. And it's going to be hard for us to push through. It's okay, you know, you can talk about the furlough scheme, but that doesn't help the business. It helps the staff. And the wonderful Chancellor decided then at the end of all that, you know, that he was to take away, he took away the job retention scheme. Now, if you have 175 staff like me, that's 175 grand just taken away. So it is about pennies, it's about numbers game. It's about money, and it's about keeping our head above the water. And all our businesses are financially okay. We've been able to do that. We've borrowed everything we can, but we've pushed the rents back. We've got free rates, of course. The Chancellor's been good about the VAT. But it's not a pretty picture out there. So we've just got to hold tight, to be honest. I'm sure, as everybody else is probably saying the same thing, until we get some sort of vaccine or some other type of wonder drug.
Absolutely, and that is the key. And I know through the webinars we've been doing throughout the period in Mid-Ulster Council, you know, the supports have been there, and they've been, I suppose, invaluable at times and so on. You mentioned, you know, the compliance document, Michael, and what other things do you think maybe possibly can help the industry at this stage? We're facing into Christmas, for example, and maybe we'll talk a wee bit about that later on, as maybe sort of some ideas going into Christmas and takeaways for businesses who are on today. But are there any other things that you feel, you know, the executive or, you know, local government even can do to help support businesses at this stage?
Well, if you look at other countries and you look at France and Germany, they've covered loss of profit, loss of turnover. It's a cash game, so people have to try to support us in some way financially a bit better. And I'm sure there's people out there absolutely pulling the hair out. We're having an ongoing battle against the big insurers as well, which is, I don't know what people are out there insured for, but we have actually pushed our legals down that road, which is costing an awful lot of money. It's now going to the Supreme Court. The only problem we have with the Supreme Court, that our advice is that a lot of the Supreme Court, and people are not going to take this nicely, but it's run by the Tory government, a lot of the Supreme Court, and they have a lot of friends in the Supreme Court. So we can lose in the Supreme Court. If we win, it'll be a total windfall for hospitality, which they deserve it, because we've been hanging on now since March, and the insurance company said, well, oh, COVID, no, you're not covered. So we are. It's business interruption, we're covered, and so you're not. So it's been like that, with quite a negative, cheeky response from insurance companies. So that's one road. If you need to put a claim down, put the claim in and keep claiming and keep talking, and put your head up and take everything you can. Of course, there's the ongoing battle with landlords, the ongoing battle with, nobody wants to see their suppliers go down that road. We want to keep our suppliers on board. You may have to look at renegotiating your credit terms, maybe taking it from 30 days to 90 days or whatever. Try to keep everyone on board and keep talking to people. If you can get away without paying your rent, don't pay it. Get it pushed back for a while. It's about cash is king, and it's about trying to keep your cash. The banks will all be good to us at the moment. This time next year it may be a different picture. But I do think we can bounce back if we're smart and all listen to each other and listen to each other's pain. Because some people have been affected by this mentally, physically, emotionally. And it's with us, it's going to be with us for a while. If the vaccine doesn't work, we're going to be there for another while. And I think the whole face of hospitality will change. I think the respect for hospitality needs to change. You know, our staff didn't buy into being security guards. When you come in, you know, you take the people's name and you take the address. You tell them to put their mask on. You tell them to sit down. You tell them when they get up to go to the lobby to put their mask back on. You know, so trying to keep the thing pure between us and the customers we're there to serve the customers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time maybe that people started to ask people in hospitality, were they all right? How are they doing today?
And
They
Michael,
they didn't buy into this.
absolutely. And that moves us on then to sort of the central theme of Mid-Ulster Council's Enterprise Week, where we were looking at the whole idea of resilience. And I suppose, how have you stayed resilient, and, how can people in business, how can the sector become more resilient? I suppose you are resilient, you're out there, you're still fighting, you talked about building your outdoors section at Dean's at Queen's and so on. So what keeps you going, and maybe what sort of pointers have you got for the industry as well to kind of give people a bit of sort of backbone, perhaps?
Well, people will always want to eat. People will always need to drink. We are social people. We've always been. And whenever we did first open back up, the amount of people that supported us was fantastic. But people have now been frightened. Now, when we opened our books, when we were meant to open a couple of weeks ago, our books were quite empty. To be honest, I did not see the big support coming to the ground that we're going to go out to the restaurant again. So I remember back to Flags whenever we had that, and we had a fella called John Keane. I don't know if he's listening to Ed, I doubt it. We had a Take Back the City campaign, which was put through the Tourist Board and Discovered Ireland and whatever else, and we're going to need something like that. We've got to take day by day now. We do bounce back well as a nation, as a sector. It's having the belief in the sector, getting people to believe in the sector, and keep shouting and keep telling people this isn't good enough. We're not the bogeyman. I don't know if you follow my Facebook site, that it's about hospitality is not the enemy, and it isn't the enemy. There's no data to show why we're closed, if we're allowed to open. And I really, to be honest, I mean, I've appealed, and I'm going to start to appeal today, that if we are seen to be spreading this virus, tell us how we're doing it, tell us how we can get better, or else just close us down to March until we get the vaccine. Tell us all to go away, lock us up, but give us the money to see us through. And there's the great bank crashes and everything else, all money was there. Hospitality needs the money, it needs the support. We just can't go into free fall. We look at London about to go into free fall. There's people who arrived here from other parts of the world and other countries who are now actually physically sleeping on the streets. And we can't see this happen. We have to be resilient, and we have to stand up, and we have to say it's not good enough. So I'm hassling with Stormont every day, hassling with our own people, hospitality, Ulster, and I fight with our own as well as the others, and it's all we can do.
And in terms of any future lessons, then Michael, what are the sort of the takeaways? If we're going to sort of look back, probably over the last year, what future lessons perhaps do we have for the sector?
I think we just have to be. I think we've learned a lot. I think people have learned a lot about hygiene, about how we live our own lives. About we should probably be washing our hands not much as we go along. We've learned that hospitality maybe doesn't have enough respect as an industry like it should have. We've been calling about that for years. So let's get a bit more respect. Let's not be frightened anymore to charge for what it costs you to do. You're not here to do it for nothing. And I think that's what it's beating people in hospitality into the ground. Lessons learned. Just don't be second best. Learn to love each other a bit more. It's an industry which is quite bitchy in a lot of its own ways. I don't think it's a bad thing if you're trying to be the best and provide a good product. And maybe talk to each other a bit more, visit each other a bit more, put our arm, if we were ever allowed to put our arms around each other again.
Yeah.
But you've got to follow the rule book. The rule book has been absolutely terrible. With regards rule of six, the 3 household thing. When people all come down the taxi together and have to sit in 3 different tables because they're from 3 different families. And I don't know who makes this up. And just it's about having respect for our own industry and feeling the love.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that idea, that it is a really important industry as well. Do you think it can scale back up again, Michael? Where, I suppose just looking a wee bit to the future now, as sort of like a lesson, can we scale back up again? What impact, for example, might the vaccine have and things like that?
We've always been very slow to work ourselves back up, but we are resilient and we've got back up. And I've always been one of the battlers about the licensing and Good Friday. That should already be ripped up and aligned through it. I'm sick of sitting on the William Crawley show with the Reverend Michael Deane, who doesn't want to sell any alcohol anyway. Alcohol has definitely been demonised. We coming from a government which doesn't really support alcohol, it supports hospitality. It's a difficult one to get right. It's going to take a long time for us to rebuild. I mean, when you look at things like the airport and the airport duties and the landing tax, we need travel. We need corporate. We need people coming in from London. We need people coming from America. We need that. We need that to make it grow. And I know how much business we need to do a week. I know how much we need to do a month. And when you hear people saying, well, we'll open up without alcohol, they're already 50% down. To take away another 30% of your sales, obviously a lot of people not doing their homework. But we will bounce back. It could be different. I mean, I could end up maybe in 2 or 3 months with just one restaurant. Who knows? Who knows how difficult this is going to be for people out there. I'm prepared to just take whatever's left and try to rebuild on it. Because it started with nothing. If we end up with nothing, we just have to build again.
Absolutely.
And hope. And I know there's probably a lot of people there have got their head in their hands saying, I can't go on with, but you have to go on. There's no point in going to work for an Amazon driving a lorry.
Because you've got the love for the industry and the love for food, and it's kind of like us, I suppose. Well, I'm tourism, but again, the love for tourism is there as well, and it's very difficult to maybe shift away from that. But in terms of your staff, then, Michael, and your teams across your restaurants and so on, going forward, has the furlough scheme and all of the supports been, good for them, or are they still there for you?
I think it was a great lifeline. The furlough scheme, as the Chancellor started to rip it back, he then had to reintroduce it because there had to be some type of lifeline, or else everybody was going to be on other Golden Dole or Universal Credit or whatever. So yes, the staff are still there, and they're very resilient because they've worked for Dean's for a long time, most of them. But I think that there's going to probably have to be something more until this virus disappears or half disappears. And to be fair on government, the government money, it hasn't been that bad. Whether the Labour government would have been able to throw the same sort of things at us, I don't know.
Well, we'll not get into that now. We're not getting into that.
That's a whole other story. But our own executive, if there is that money up there, I think they need to throw some to hospitality. They're very quick to throw it at wind farms and very quick to throw it at certain government parties. But we do need support, and there needs to be probably billions of pounds thrown at the relaunch of hospitality. I mean billions. We have to try to rebuild this city from the ground up. And if we do have the financial support, we definitely have the people on the ground to do it. We have the personalities. We have some of the best musicians who haven't worked.
Yeah.
Belfast is an absolutely powerful city for music, for food. It's 3-star Michelin restaurants, which nearly need to be supported. It takes them probably, I don't know what the guys Knox and Muddlers Club say, but I mean, for us to reopen a Michelin-star restaurant, it takes about 10 days. It takes about 10 days to close it down again. And they want you to open up in 15 minutes. So, yeah, we will rebuild. We mightn't be able to rebuild with everything, but we'll be there in some shape or form. And I think they have to start to let licensing be a bit different. Let people drink a cup of coffee in a street instead of, tell us to take a blackboard in, tell us to do this, tell us to do that. A lot of modelling needs to be done by down south, and I know Dublin's on its knees. I have many friends there. Yeah. But Dublin's a great city to model on. Their whole hospitality sector, it's also one of the best in the world. So I think a joined up approach without the politics to see where the island's going. We're probably going to need each other for a hell of a long time.
And definitely, from a tourism point of view and a hospitality point of view, Michael, a strong Belfast is strong for Mid-Ulster as well, because we're depending, for example, on maybe the tourists coming into Belfast, maybe they're centred in Belfast, based in Belfast, but for the likes of a lot of our visitor attractions and so on, it's really key, that if you've got a strong Belfast and a strong product there, people will move out into Mid-Ulster. For example, we have a lovely Dava Dark Sky project set to open. We have our Seamus Heaney home place and Hill of the O'Neill, which is where I'm sitting at the minute. And those centres at all of our other businesses really need a strong Belfast, be it like the film industry was just really getting going in Belfast as well. So things like that are, I suppose, green shoots for the future as well.
Yeah, we probably don't see enough of that. We do feel the love from Derry, Stoke, London, Derry, Armagh, blah, blah, blah. We want it all to work, because when people aren't, maybe people might spend a couple of nights in Belfast and a couple of wonderful hotels that we've been able to produce, and the Merchant, the Grand Central, the great restaurants, but there needs to be other parts. They need to travel out. It's a beautiful country. And the people outside Belfast need support. And it's probably a selfish attitude that's all we seem to talk about is Belfast, and that's all we tend to be worried about. But I don't think that's the case.
You need to spread the love.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Okay, so just to move on then, so our sort of key thoughts and takeaways then for hospitality and tourism, just in general, Michael, what would be the sort of three kind of key things that you feel are important going forward for the industry, given where we are today?
Well, we've definitely learned lessons, deep lessons. And I know we've been told that with our options for takeaway and deliveries was a thing to do, and we had some of our great food journalists saying that eating out was the new eating in, or eating in was the new eating out, or whatever way to put it. And I deplore that. I hated doing the deliveries and the takeaways, but our guys are trying very, very hard to do that. The first couple of days we tried to serve a couple of bottles of wine, and all of a sudden we had the PSNIs, and we're not allowed to do this and allowed to do that. So the takeaway business, as in food, it's just a drop in the pond, basically. It's a little bit, and then everybody was doing that after a couple of weeks. So if we're resilient, then we'll always chase the ball, and people will try to provide this. I mean, I just see my phone there. It's got about 20 messages on about, are we doing takeaway turkey boxes? And many people are going to do it. For how many people is going to be allowed in people's houses? If you're not allowed. So how do we move forward of trying to get through this December with putting a little cash in, but even putting a little contentment into the people, our own people who are doing it. If you're not allowed 3 people in your house at Christmas, what was that going to make them feel mentally? We have a lot of foreign staff from all around the world who are in their own houses in their own world. So trying to look after them is going to be very, very difficult. So every day we're probably hitting other problems and other difficulties, and we have to dust ourselves down. And if it's going to be takeaways all December, whenever the government tell us, hopefully this week, what our new restrictions are going to be added on to the restrictions we already have, people all have to make business decisions whether they want to open for those 10 days. I think we're going to have to, if that's what the restrictions are going to be. That's what's coming out of the hill at the moment. We'll be allowed 10 days, then they're going to close us again now.
Right, okay.
How do you pack in everything? Do you open for those 10 days? Do you open breakfast, lunch, and dinner for those 10 days? So once we get the advice, people will have to decide themselves how they can get cash into the business.
And when you mention something like that, maybe opening for 10 days and then maybe a closure again, resilience really is key there. And I suppose there are some hard decisions that businesses will have to take in light of something like that.
It's how they understand this. If they put it up on a website on a Friday night at 10:30, we have somebody watching their website all the time to see what the conditions are. But how do you expect a Chinese guy in Donegal Pass even to understand that, or an Indian guy on Lisbon Road to pick up the information who's not a member of Hospitality Ulster or anything else? So the people have to feed the information down to us a bit better, and there's been far too much of a gap. There's been steering groups apparently consulting the ministers. We've never been part of any of these steering groups. It's people, I don't know where the people from who are appointing it. Give the people the proper information, give the people the proper data, and maybe as time goes on, we'll be allowed to make our own decisions around where a lot to do. If we're being seen to be responsible, we've got the documentation of the compliancy, blah, blah, blah. If we've got all that, if we're able to move forward, well, and we should be allowed to make our own decisions. And I think that that shouldn't be too far away. And if people don't follow the guidelines, it should be closed. But for Stephen Nolan to say maybe traffic wardens could do this, I don't know where he got that one from. But there you go.
Yeah. And that is, I suppose, that is one of the key things maybe as a takeaway from today. You know, the communication really needs to improve. You know, the announcements are made, and then how does that translate out into the sector? We have a WhatsApp group here in Mid-Ulster, and when an announcement is made, it just goes on fire, you know, questions. So that flow of information maybe, and maybe breaking down the announcements maybe much quicker is probably quite important, because it allows people to know and to plan.
Yeah, that's the key, is trying to plan, and people haven't been given the time, or they haven't been given the data. And I think most people in hospitality feel as if they're trying to have their lights put out here, and that's not the case. People are having to make hard decisions, and I know how everybody was annoyed last week at government, and all sorts of language has been used, but very difficult with a five-party coalition to try to gather the information. And when you're on the radio and you're debating with medicine and medics, and it's very, very hard. It's not an even playing field. So people have to try to just settle themselves down, curb their anger, and follow the rule book. And I do believe that if everybody follows the rule book and does this properly, we'll be okay. I mean, I think the worst thing can happen, and probably the best thing can happen, if it was an all-Ireland approach, if we all had the lockdown day after Christmas, and it was funded by EU, UK government, or whoever funded it, I think we might be in a better place, because it's going to do people's heads completely in if they have to keep opening and closing and even closing. They'll be getting all staff notices, they'll be getting, people just had enough of this. At the end of the day, we're in the service industry, so be truthful with them, try to understand about our industry. We can't even open and close every 2 days because the R rate spikes. Now, the R rate's already spiked again, I say, through reasons unknown: schools, universities, churches, supermarkets, while hospitality is being closed. So come talk to us. Don't blame it on us whenever we open for the 10 days. And of course there'll be a spike in the R rate, but we've got to stop being the bogeyman.
Great. Michael, that's fantastic. It's been lovely talking to you here, Michael. I could sit talking to you all day, but I see there's lots of questions coming in at the bottom of the screen. So okay. I think I'm going to hand over to Neil. He's out there somewhere in the ether, hopefully. Yeah, there he goes. And Neil, are you going to go through the questions?
Yes, I can go through. We've had quite a few questions submitted here. So one question that is from Hugh McCloy. He feels that he gets the impression that it's about limiting adult to adult contact, but to him, the general feeling is that hospitality is making COVID plans and risk assessments for nothing. How do you feel about this?
I think I'd absolutely agree with them. The risk assessments, which we all went through, we had special advice on that. We had special people come in to do this, and it was basically ripped up in front of our faces to say it's not good enough. I think that we need to go through this all again. I'll go back also to a government that will look at us and say, well, there's a sheet of compliance, there's mine, blah, 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 a bit like taxing your car. I've paid the money, I've done all the dot-to-dot exercise, there it is, we demand that we could open. Now, there's hundreds and hundreds of places that didn't follow this, and that's not for us to put the boot in to say that people didn't follow it. But we know that there was people buying empty pizza boxes and dividing it amongst 20 or 30 people. So the place like that should be closed. And I think you're absolutely right there. The risk assessments went through and through again have been an absolute waste of money. But I still think we have to do it, because when we do come out of this, we've shown that there's the evidence, so we've been on the right trail.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question: do you worry about our international reputation, given the way COVID is handled politically and operationally, given our statistics? The person that asked this question had been to World Travel Market, and an Italian operator had said to them that it's bad in Northern Ireland. They were rattled a bit, given that the Italian statistics to answer, but it showed them that the world is watching our tourism and hospitality industry. And you know, the wider world is watching Northern Ireland at the moment in statistics.
I think Northern Ireland has always had this great difficulty, even long before COVID, when people were watching Sky News and they would see a police car and a bomb exploding or whatever else, and it's somehow we have to try to rebuild that somehow. And you know, looking at UK, looking at Northern Ireland, when I go around the streets now, yeah, COVID has completely brought Belfast to a place it doesn't want to be, and the media's job is to do their job, and I think that they've done it very well. And yeah, the whole reputation of getting people back into the UK, I think it's going to be difficult, but I think it's all over the world. It's the same. There's COVID everywhere, so it's not just the UK. It's European wide. And I mean, who's going to get on a flight to go to America tomorrow? There's still people doing it, but it's a worldwide problem which will go away. It has to go away.
Okay, thank you. A question from Jessica Rogers. How can we as interior designers better serve the hospitality industry? We're working hard to redesign spaces and be an anchor for our hospitality clients. Is there anything else we can support on?
I think that's a great question. I think we have to look at new spaces. Spaces will become different. When I drive around and look at some of the smaller, tinier places which have been hit very badly, a lot of them could be finished. So whenever we've been looking at the whole system about what way people serve, what way to serve wine, what way we put the cutlery down. So yeah, I think we've got to try to look at bigger spaces. And if anyone goes down and look at our space at Deans and Queen, you can see how well spread out it is, how much air there is in there. People are going to one space. I can't see people going into the little tiny restaurants anymore. So it's trying to find the bigger spaces and stuff that'll last. I know design changes by the day, by the moment, but stuff is going to be more or less timeless, not too minimalist or not too old school type of place, because I think it tends to gather a lot of dust and whatever. So I think it's having new light, new space, clean air. And we've been here before, I think, and a lot of people didn't like that sort of designed restaurant, but I think we're going to go back to be a lot more continental.
Okay, great, thank you. A question here from Shirley Walker. Michael, what are the main issues that staff are experiencing that they need support with?
I think fear is definitely the biggest thing, more or less, for their job, their career. It's probably not what they bought into, but that's where they are. The difficulty is with some of the public when they do come in, the rebel rousers who don't want to wear a mask. Stop, you have to wear a mask. We point straight at the sanitizer, blah, blah, blah. Our guys are used to meeting and greeting people with a smile. Behind the mask, there's a smile. Going to your table, taking a drink order. All that has completely changed. So, and they're frightened to make a mistake. They're frightened to do something wrong. They're frightened of getting COVID themselves. When people come up with no mask on and start talking 2 inches away from their face. So fear is the biggest thing. And people in hospitality, as we say, we do share the love. We know we're not the people in the front line in AHS. We experience the love that they have, but we also experience the love from people at the NHS when they come into the restaurant to see how glad we are open. So we're very much in the service industry to welcome those people in. And when we're closed, they're absolutely, we've got so many questions from them. When do we open? We want to see the lovely staff. I know all our staff by names. And let's hope that they can come through this too.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Hugh McCloy. He feels steering groups seem to be a mythical gathering to him. What way can hospitality get involved more in decision-making processes?
Well, I think one of the things we have to do, I think that question is exactly a good question. I don't know why there are queues outside bars. I don't know why this was allowed to happen. We've never had a queue outside the restaurant. We've spaced the tables. And the social gathering is definitely a problem. You know, weddings are definitely a problem. Funerals have been a problem. We know all that. But with us being guilty of having 100 people in the building and we've had to now have 50, the issue is not the alcohol. The issue is not people being in the one room at the one time. So I think the social gathering is definitely a big problem, which we have addressed. But I think there's hundreds and hundreds of businesses haven't addressed that. And go through the document of compliance, that has to be done. And there can't be any more queues outside bars, any queues outside anywhere. It has to be done properly. We have to take the names, we have to take the addresses, and it's the only way to go forward. I'm really looking forward to seeing how we open up here, what it's going to be like. I don't think it's going to be that much different than the last time, and that makes me quite angry.
Okay. Another question here from Michelle McGreary. What do you feel should be done about developing the future talent pipeline for the hospitality sector while all of the current challenges are going on?
Well, I think we've always had talent that's come through Northern Ireland. I think the colleges and especially on Titanic and there's a few other really good colleges in Newry and bits and pieces right throughout the country. Even up in your own part of the world, there's been some great stuff. And we've just got to keep teaching people. I think the methods will be different. I think the hygiene will be very high. I think the new food that's in the world and how people treat things has been absolutely great. So we can't stop because we're in the middle of this. All industries have to continue, and the training and the talent needs to be there. And we just keep focusing on it. We keep teaching all the time, embracing the youth, and we've got a fabulous youth. And I mean, and our job, in the word of Thomas Keller, I mean, we have to make the best of the new love. Or if we don't make the best of the new industry, well, then we fail. So we just have to keep teaching, supporting. When you look at the likes of our young guy Alex Green in Great British Menu this year, when you look at Northern Ireland has absolutely got superb talent now. 15 years ago, we wouldn't have imagined that. So we have to support the young talent. We have to give them a stage and make hay when the sun shines again.
Great. And a question from Barry McCarney. With all that's been going on, have you had much of a chance to gauge what effect Brexit will have to your business or plans that you'll be putting in place?
I think that's probably the next nightmare to hit us. You know, when we so long practiced trying to be European, we wanted the European culture. This is my opinion. And you know, we've had so many connections, especially with our staff, work experience from colleges. We had people in from France and from Germany, whatever. When we're told that a lot of this is finished now. I think Northern Ireland was on a solo run for too many years, but we always reached out to Europe. It was great to be part of Europe. I don't see that it'll ever be repositioned again, but you know, the scary words that we're having coming down the line now about we're not going to be able to control the produce, but we're going to be having stuff coming in from America, cheap poultry, bits and pieces. There's an awful lot of different nightmares, pricing, wine, you know, a lot of people in Northern Ireland are very price sensitive. They like to see what they get for their pound note. How do you put that amount of price on a meal on a bottle of wine when people obviously are probably going to be earning less than they ever have? So yeah, I think Brexit's the next nightmare coming down the line.
Okay, thank you. One other question just in relation to Christmas. I think a lot of hospitality, you know, Christmas is a bit of an unknown this year. And they want to know advice on how you see Christmas bookings happening this year. Are there going to be Christmas bookings, or like what is your view that you see it happening in December?
Well, I think consumer confidence is basically on the floor. I think it's in a bad place. So we will not be taking any big Christmas parties, not just because we're not allowed to, but just because we won't. It's going to be the rule of six. I think if it's a rule of six, it should be that, whether it's from 2 families or 3 families. And even if it's a rule of 4, but let people come into a restaurant. So if it's a family of 8, they can sit in 2 tables of 4 or whatever it be. but let people have a little bit of Christmas. A lot of people might never see Christmas again, elderly people, whatever, people who maybe aren't that well. So otherwise, if we can't give us something to look forward to, just close us down and cancel Christmas. Because hospitality is all about Christmas. And I know it's going to be different. The people who make their money in December aren't going to make the same amount of money. And we just have to try to keep our heads up and go through this and feed people the best we can underneath the guidelines. And I don't think Christmas is going to be the happy Christmas that we deserve, to be fair.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. That's all questions that have been submitted so far. If anyone else has any questions, suppose it's just your last chance to submit any just in the Q&A. But Mary, I don't know if you've got any other questions there that you would like to put to Michael?
No, I think, Michael, you've done a brilliant job this morning and given us some great pointers and tips. I loved your comments on our talent and our young people. And the flow of young people into the industry. We really have to try and nurture that and continue that. And I know there's been a hospitality challenge fund, and a number of different organisations have accessed that and are preparing for that. And you've definitely given them a stage. And I think to continue to do that is really, really important. If we can just, as you say, get reopened and get back to some kind of normality. So that's, I think for me, that was a lovely takeaway from this morning. Thank you very much, Michael.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. We just have on the screen there just some useful organisations and links that are provided by Mid-Ulster District Council. So I just want to thank both Michael and Mary, particularly Michael, just for all your advice on what you've said this morning. As I said at the start, we'll be sending slides, and this webinar has been recorded, so it will be available on the council website in due course. We will also be sending a short evaluation link, just that you can do that online after this morning's webinar. We'd appreciate just any feedback on the webinar today, just to help with planning for the future. Please also don't forget to check the council's Facebook page on Friday evening to see if you're a winner of today's daily prize. Each day there will be a prize draw for people that have taken part in the webinars, and the lucky winners can win an iPad or a Fitbit. So someone from the council, an officer, will be in contact with you. Please feel free to register for any of the other webinars that are taking place during Enterprise Week. They're all free to attend, and you can connect or register for them through the council website. So again, on behalf of Mid-Ulster District Council, thank you, Michael, thank you, Mary, and thank you for everyone for attending this morning. And we hope to see you again at future events for the council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.